So look at verse 1 again. Paul says, receive one who is weak in the faith, but not to disputes over doubtful things. Paul addresses the instructions, first of all, he addresses the instructions to the stronger Christian. The stronger Christian. The stronger Christian in this case is the Christian who has liberty, who has the liberty to do something. They do not have a personal conviction to abstain from a thing. They're free in Christ to do it. The weaker Christian is the Christian who does feel a personal conviction to abstain from something or to prohibit something in their life. So it's interesting to me that the Christian who abstains from certain things, again, we're not talking about things that are forbidden in the Scriptures, but it's a personal conviction to abstain from certain things. That Christian is actually the weaker Christian. We might describe that person today as a legalistic Christian. The legalistic Christian who has certain prohibitions in their own life. They prohibit certain activities in their life, right? Don't drink, don't chew, don't go with girls that do, that kind of thing. The legalistic Christian is actually the weaker Christian. The legalistic Christian is actually the weaker Christian, and that's why they have all these prohibitions and rules and things that they abstain from. Now, that legalistic Christian views themselves usually as the stronger Christian because they have all these rules that they follow, and they believe that they're actually a stronger Christian by following those self-imposed prohibitions, but they're actually the weaker Christian. They're weaker than the Christian who has the liberty to do those things. And Paul addresses this section to the stronger believer who has the liberty. Again, he says to that stronger believer, receive one who is weak in the faith, but not to disputes over doubtful things. Receive the brother or sister in Christ who is weak in the faith and abstains from certain things because of their personal convictions. Receive them, but don't dispute with them. Don't dispute with them over their personal opinions or over their personal convictions. Don't argue with them. Don't try to persuade them to change their personal convictions. Don't try to convince them that their convictions are wrong. And tell them, hey, you're free in Christ. You don't need to have all these prohibitions in your life. You don't have to abstain from that. You're free in Christ to enjoy it. Just accept them, Paul says, and accept their personal convictions that they hold. Don't try to convert them to your point of view. And again, this applies only to the non-essentials. Receive them with their personal convictions and their personal opinions. Don't try to change their mind. Don't try to impose your opinions on them. Now, Paul gives us two examples here that were relevant to the believers in the Church of Rome. They're maybe not so relevant to us today, but the principle applies to us today. The first example that Paul gives is regarding abstaining from certain foods. The second example that Paul gives is regarding esteeming certain days above other days. And so abstaining from certain foods and esteeming certain days, well, that's a matter of personal conviction. That's a matter of personal opinion. In verse 2 he says, "For one believes he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. Let not him who eats despise him who does not eat, and let not him who does not eat judge him who eats, for God has received him." Now, just to give you some context here, the church in Rome, we're talking about, a local church just like this. In that church in Rome, there were Jewish and Gentile believers in Jesus Christ. And some of those Jewish believers likely grew up within Judaism, under the Mosaic Law, under the Old Covenant, and they kept the dietary laws under Judaism. While they were growing up, they kept the dietary laws that prohibited eating certain foods, such as pork or shellfish. Those foods were considered unclean under the dietary laws of the Mosaic covenant. Once they came to faith in Jesus Christ, they were no longer under the dietary laws of the old covenant. They were free in Christ to eat whatever they wanted, but their conscience wasn't free. They were free in Christ, but their conscience wasn't free. For some of those Jewish Christians in the church in Rome, it was so ingrained in them that some foods are unclean, that they couldn't bring themselves to eat those foods because of their background in Judaism, because of how they grew up. They just couldn't bring themselves to eat a pulled pork sandwich or steamed shrimp, because it just was embedded in them that those foods are unclean. And so that was their conviction. And they abstained from certain foods that were unclean because of their personal conviction. They would feel guilty if they ate those foods. As I mentioned earlier, some of you were raised in a church tradition where you dressed up for church, suit and tie or the dress, that kind of thing, and you could never show up at church casually dressed. You could never show up just in shorts and flip-flops. You couldn't do it. You would be in knots about it. You would feel so convicted, like you're sinning by dressing so casually for church. And you understand you're free in Christ and you're free to wear whatever you want to church and you come as you are, but your conscience isn't free. For conscience sake, you just can't do it.